Welcome to Cloud Radio, made for full-stack cloud operators. Cloud Radio covers all aspects of the business of software. Hi, our guest today is Ryan Walsh. He's the founder and CEO of RepVue. If you don't know about RepVue, they are very much like Glassdoor, except exclusively focused on sales. And much of their review base, over 100,000 a year and growing, are from the technology industry and most especially software. So through that platform, they have a lot of visibility into quota attainment, product market fit, inbound lead flow, culture, across a range of industries, segments. So Ryan has a lot of intelligence there. And beyond that, he was the chief revenue officer of Channel Advisor, e-commerce oriented SaaS company that went public, was recently acquired by private equity. So Ryan can speak to a whole range of issues across the sales universe. Great guest. Thankful to have him. Hope you enjoyed the episode. So today we've got Ryan Walsh from RepVue, and we'll just get right into it. Ryan, do you want to give people your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. Happy to share the story about me and RepVue and dive into some of the questions that you and hopefully the people listening will get some value out of. Yes, so my background, without going too deep in too many layers, I've had a number of different kind of sections of my career, but they're all focused on sales. So I'm a software sales executive. I came out of school in the late 90s, actually got on board with a startup and got acquired for about $180 million. This is like a quick aside of for those of you who are not around in the .com bubble. So the company that I joined, it was 6 months old. It was sold 3 months later for $180 million and had no revenue. Okay. So that's one story that happened. It was sold to a company called Overture, which at the time it was called GoTo.com. It was the original largest search engine out there, rebranded to Overture, and then Overture was eventually sold to Yahoo, and probably a good thing Yahoo bought them because that carried their number for a number of years as well, the search revenue that they got through Overture. And then Google kind of took over consumer search, and Overture was kind of a plug and play engine for a lot of, front end sites like the Yahoos and the other portals. Anyways, the founder of that company started a new company in 2001. I stayed there from 2001 to 2017, enterprise sales executive, director of strategic accounts, director of sales, vice president of sales, chief revenue officer. I ended up running the sales organization from 2011, end of 11 to 2017. I took over the org at about 35 million in top line and left about 115 million in top line. We did an IPO in 2013, so I left about 4 years after the IPO. My career essentially has been built on the basis of helping salespeople succeed in their career. So my career is helping other salespeople succeed in their career, because as a leader, that's the only way that you can really make it work effectively. Enjoy selling, enjoy software. It was a SaaS e-commerce product called Channel Advisor, recently acquired by private equity, and it was a great run. Learned a ton, and many ups and downs. Survived the 2008 financial crisis, and learned quite a bit. So that's the 3 to 4 minute background on my career, but fairly single threaded with the thread of sales running all the way through it.
Interesting. And how did that lead into you creating RepVue?
Yeah, so RepVue, first of all, started as a side project about a year after I left Channel Advisor, my last corporate role. I was doing some consulting. I just kind of assumed I'd go back to an operator role, and I wasn't super aggressive in looking for one, and I was making okay money doing consulting. I didn't really like the consulting. It definitely wasn't going to be my long-term thing. So I figured probably some sort of operator role in tech, in software. And like I said, I was taking my time. I had the idea of RepVue. Really, the basis of it was, and this is something I lived through, was that we as a business can hit our number. And we as a business can grow, and we as a business can even do an IPO, but we never had 40% of the team hitting quota. It was always about that 40% level, never 50, in the 40s. And, at the time, I'm like, I kind of always struggle with that, right? Can we get 50%? Can we get half the team hitting quota? But it was always very, very hard. Attrition was always a problem. Even, people loved a lot of things about working with us and on our team, but attrition was always in sales, 25% in the US, 35 to 38% outside of the US. X% of the people not hitting quota, yet here we are growing year on year, do an IPO, all that. And it's like, all right, well, this is really interesting. So, and then I as I do consulting, I find that other companies are experiencing the same things, in many cases worse, right? 40%, 45% hitting quota, that's normal, right? Or is it, or should it be? And so the concept of RepVue is basically that there's a problem that is information asymmetry during the interview process, right? The salesperson delivers, and you could say this about any role, the candidate delivers an abundance of information to the company. The information that flows back is fairly limited, right? That's easily identified based on the amount of time asking questions, right? The company asking. Oh, hey, we got a few minutes left in the interview. Do you have any questions for us? We have 4 minutes left. Hey, we got 5 minutes left in the interview. Do you have any questions for us? Right? Like that's how it goes. And so the best way for a salesperson to that opportunity is if their friend works there, right? But like you don't have a friend that works everywhere. Right. And so what if we could take that friend conversation at a massive scale and deliver it to salespeople so that they can access all the information that they need regarding the health of a sales organization, the performance of a sales organization, and most importantly, what are my opportunities to go there and be really successful if I join that sales organization? So the basis for RepVue is that let's collect a bunch of information about companies. Let's collect some information about salespeople. We can match them together. They can do diligence. And so RepVue is born as a rating. It's essentially a survey. So RepVue is a survey. And what we're surveying, or I guess first who we're surveying are salespeople, sales professionals. That's account execs, SDRs, account managers, customer success, enablement, managers too. Anybody under the solution consultants, anybody under that umbrella, revenue umbrella, not necessarily marketing, but kind of the go-to-market umbrella besides marketing. And the survey captures the most relevant information that we can then take, codify, and deliver at scale, turn that codified information into unique profiles of companies. Okay. So the information we collect are things like the sentiment of the seller related to product market fit, related to lead flow, related to culture and leadership, related to, professional development, compensation. And then we're also capturing actual compensation data. What percent of your team is hitting quota? What is your base comp? What is your on-target earnings? If I'm number one on the team, how much could I earn? Like, is this a 200K package? Can I earn 400, 600? $1 million more, right? So you take all that information, you package it, and a salesperson can go to look at a company profile and say, oh, I'm interviewing at the enterprise team. Looks like the enterprise team at large company XYZ is at 58% of quota. That's pretty good. And they rate them well on lead flow. And that's good because I don't like making cold calls, right? And they rate them poorly on culture. Okay, well, I don't really care as long as the product is rated well and the lead flow is rated well. And there's a good comp plan. So it's a lot of information that allows the salesperson to kind of curate the experience that they need to see and make the decisions for their career based on what's important to them. And so really that's what we do. We've grown a lot in the last 3 years, came out of beta 2020. End of 2020, we had 7,500 total ratings. So yeah, not that many. End of 21, we had 37,000. So okay, we're getting there. And then end of last year, we had 110,000 ratings. And so we'll double that again this year easily. And we publish companies when they get 7 ratings. So the ratings, so we have 2,500 company profiles published. We have data on 19,000 companies. So to put a bow on this, and we can dive into details kind of where you'd like, but what is RepVue at its core? It's a machine that collects and aggregates sales organization health and performance data. That data can be used in a multitude of valuable ways across a number of constituents who want to learn about and understand the health of the sales organization in a near real-time way. And as I've spent most of my time describing, the number one and first constituent is B2B salespeople because they can make career decisions. But of course, there's other constituents who might, gain value from that, that information. So that's kind of the basis behind RepVue. We're super excited about what we're building. We're really happy that we also get to be somewhat mission driven by helping people make better career decisions, give them a better chance to hit their quota, give them a better chance to see some really strong income by improving their decision-making process.
Yeah, that is a real mission, like people being misled and, oversold, and then 2 years of their life are wasted, right? That's
exactly right.
A pretty significant issue. And, part of the way I came across RepVue was, I'm a bit of an investor and also very analytical. And I was looking at, as we were transitioning from a very buoyant SaaS economy to one that was declining, what are real-time indicators of the climate? And I noticed through your very well-designed website, I could see quota attainment, at the enterprise level, at the middle market level, and it was updating very fast. And quota attainment is one of the best indicators of the health of an organization and also the industry. And so maybe that's a transition into kind of your view on the market environment. What are quota attainments looking like? Differences between enterprise, middle market, public versus private? Like, what's the state of the market that RepVue allows you to see?
Yeah, so let me first clarify. When you're talking, like when we're talking in the context of RepVue, what is quota attainment? So for us, what quota attainment is really tied to the actual question that we ask the user, which is specific to your role. What percent of team members typically achieve their quota? Okay, that's the question that we ask. And so to clarify even further, we're not asking, did you hit quota? Okay, because A, we don't care, and B, not to be cynical, but there's salespeople and they all hit quota every single time. Nobody ever misses quota. So we wanted to get something super accurate from that standpoint. And then we don't ask, did the team hit their number? Because that's A, we don't really even care. Salespeople don't care as much. They just want to know, what are my chances of hitting quota? Right? We're not looking for company information. We're looking for, typically speaking, what's the sentiment of the sales team members hitting quota. And we dabbled and tested a few different things in the early days, found this brings us to a very accurate representation of what percent of team members are hitting quota, right? So I want to clarify that. And then that brings us to your actual question, which is kind of macro, like what are we seeing? What are some of the things? So for us, we started seeing quota decline. It bobbles around, but the first year and a half, we were kind of hovered there in the 50-ish, high 40s, 50. We started seeing a downward trend last Q1 2022 for two metrics. Okay. Quota attainment sentiment, quota attainment metric was one. The other one was inbound lead flow, was actually kind of trended down a little bit before things like the culture score trend or the professional development or the, product market fit even didn't hit earlier. And the reason is those two trends are most closely associated with buyer intent and buyer behavior, right? Like, I can't hit my quota because you didn't buy. I did not get as many leads because you did not hit our lead form because you are not planning on buying, right? Like, that's the tip of the spear there. And then over time, right, less and less people are hitting quota. For better or for worse, like your culture, like it's hard to have a really great culture if nobody's winning. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that was a little bit of a lagging indicator, but really an interesting one. And then I think, the kind of September, October, November, like that's when it started to really fall off, like quota attainment down, kind of 40 and even sub 40 in different pockets across well, I can talk about it. We have an index of kind of the cloud 125 cloud companies. We publish it on Twitter every month or so, a few stats about that. So if you look at those, and it's all the names that you would probably expect, give or take, in cloud and tech and big tech enterprise software. Yeah, really, really dipped there kind of in that Q4 timeframe into January, February. We've seen a level off a bit in kind of March to April. So we're cautiously optimistic that maybe it's bottomed. It's still, the quarter is still very early, but we track it, fairly, almost real time. And so we've kind of seen, and this is specific to the quota attainment. And then I can talk also about, your question about public versus private or segments, which we have access, we have that, we can slice and dice the data. We slice the data down to the mid-market team or let's look at the enterprise team at MongoDB. Let's look at the SMB team at HubSpot. Let's look, we can look at the data very, very granularly, on a per company basis and a per segment basis, compare it for any of our statistics, any which way that you'd like to compare it as well.
Yeah. And we'll put this in the show notes, like the graph, and highlight that for people to see, because I would say, kind of in my experience tracking these things, this is still pretty novel. Like if you did a survey of investors, like asking how many people on a sales team hit quota, I don't think people would expect it would be 40%.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. Like people, when we have conversations all the time with a lot of different people, we talk to some investors sometimes as well. And I make comments like, well, 50%, like what's good? Well, if somebody's at 55%, a sales, like, okay, like let's look at that org. That may be somewhere I could 55. What about 75? What about it? It's just not realistic, right? It's just the world that we live in. We can talk about that in a few minutes as to kind of the why behind some of that over the last 3 to 10 years as to what's caused that. But it's just the world that we live in. And, and just quickly touch on, public companies are just always track just a little bit higher, almost fairly consistently than private or VC backed over time. And I attribute that to a little bit more experienced leadership, a little bit more baked playbook and process. They've all been going down, but the public have just trended just a little bit higher than, and then the VC ones maybe chasing a little bit more prone to the chase growth at all costs problem of getting to that next fundraiser over the last few years as well.
Yeah, which makes sense. It's, easiest to sell a good product. And the times on our research end, we've compared quota attainment to, Magic Quadrant type ratings in our own system. Mm-hmm. The best products sell the best, right? And have the highest quota attainment. So it's a great indicator what you have to keep selling it for you.
Yep.
And let's just get into that. I've seen your takes on like, well, why is quota attainment so low? Is it a function of lead flow, total addressable market? Like, how does this situation happen?
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of know, right? Like money was basically free for a few years, right? Like, I mean, the valuations and the dollars in late stage in tech, late stage, late stage venture capital backed, and then even, in the public markets, the valuations, stock, is just so high. Basically, money was free. And if you break that down, right, like, the metric everybody talked about, we all know it, is just growth, right? Profitability. It's a SaaS company. They'll eventually become profitable, right? Because of the economy, LTV, and you spend your money to acquire customers. All makes perfect sense, just that nobody's doing it. Nobody's managed to, like, there's very few companies that have managed to extract that economy that's going to get profitable. So it's just grow, grow, grow. And so how do you grow? If we add a sales rep, an account executive, that's $342,000. I can look at the spreadsheet. It shows every seat that I add adds $342,000 in ARR, and then if they're there 3 years, it's $394,000. And so the CFO and the CEO and like, hey, well, what if we added 100 more reps? Well, then, maybe it'll come down to 330 instead of 342, which I'm thinking, no, it'll come down a lot more than that. But that's just what happened, right? Let's just add, and by the way, we raised, $500 million on a $10 billion valuation at 80 million in ARR, growing 100%. So we better grow 100% or more. And the only way we know how to do that is heads. And that's it. I mean, it's simple. And the other thing, like we talked about this before, but like the concept of selling the TAM, right? There's big TAM. Like, well, what's Salesforce's TAM? Well, anybody that has a customer, right? Well, is it really anybody that has a customer, right? Like, the street taco vendor, I bought something, I'm a customer, but so that's their TAM, everybody who has a customer, but like what's reachable right now, right? And so what ends up happening is you grow. I'm looking at my screen. Maybe I should do it this way. You're growing the heads and heads and heds, and TAM is, and your addressable market's way up here, but you're growing so fast. And especially some of these MarTech and, these companies, they grow through their current serviceable addressable market, right? Their current serviceable addressable market. And then, by the way, there's a giant recession that happens. So that current serviceable addressable market drops by 50%. And now you've got this massive gap. Less people are hitting quota. What do? You riff them. And that's where we are. I mean, I don't know if I think that's a simple way to think about it, but that's just the reality, right? It's too many heads, not enough leads, not enough accounts, and whoops, nobody wants growth anymore. Hey, how about profitability? We're a venture-backed company, right? I talk to VCs all the time, right? It's just almost comical how different the conversations are now versus 15 months ago.
Yeah, it is pretty radical. Also on Twitter, right? You see just the extreme shift. But getting back to your point there, it really just sounds like so much of this is an overcapacity issue. You can add these heads, but nothing is changing in terms of the actual number of buyers in the market. And so you just have a lot of structural overcapacity in SaaS right now.
Yeah. And I think it's, there's two sides to it, right? There's a lot of hiring happened, but then like, the CFOs are cutting their budgets on XYZ, like everything is being scrutinized, right? So it's not only because it was grow, like, and if you just assume that the market is going to stay on fire, the VC money comes in, everything's good because, there's more, they just got to spend that money, right? And so you're going to buy more tools. And then with the spending cut, in addition to the change, now we got to be profitable. It was just a big wake up call in terms of sales capacity. And if somebody says there wasn't too much sales capacity, well, then why would you riff X% of your sales org, right? You just keep them and keep selling and cut costs somewhere else.
And I guess when you think about that too, just at the micro level, and we'll transition to another topic, is if you're a sales rep, you have a lot to figure out, right? Like how much capacity is on this team? What are leads going to be? What is achievable in this industry? And so if you're a rep, right, looking at moving to a new role, like what type of due diligence do you suggest they do?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to balance. Like, it's a really competitive market. It's hard to get a job right now for a lot of these
Yep.
people, right? So then you're going to hear me on here saying, like, why don't you ask them about their burn rate? Why don't you ask them about their cash runway? Why don't you ask them, so obviously, I'm wearing the t-shirt that says RepVue. So I would say, go to RepVue and look at things like what percent of that team is hitting quota on the mid-market team at tech company X that you're looking at. Okay, vet that with the hiring manager. Like, hey, RepVue shows this. Is it, is that accurate? Is that right? Is it, and usually it is reasonably. Not occasionally there's delta here and there, but that's a pretty good indicator. Look at the different scores. The first thing I tell people though too is like, what's important to you, right? Like, what do you care about? Like, are you okay making 35 cold calls a day, 80 cold calls a day? Are you okay selling a highly technical product? Are you okay in an environment where there's not a lot of sales support, or do you need to be structured? So the first thing before people get into it is understand what's important to you. And then once you know, like for example, I mentioned the lead flow thing. Like, if you're cool making a lot of cold calls, well, don't worry about if their lead flow score is really low, right? Because you'll self-generate your pipeline. You're good with that. If you can't stand cold calling, like, that should be a factor. Look at what do top performers earn. Look at the average deal size. Have you closed, like, if the average deal size is $95,000 for the mid-market team at tech company X, and the biggest deal experience you have is 15,000, is this somewhere you're going to spend your time? You're probably not going to get hired. Like, I can just tell you that now. Like, it's going to be tough, right? If you were 60 and you go to 95, yes, you have a chance. So think about what's important to you. Think about what your experience is, and then ask some of the questions related to that. But then I think that the next level, which is what I was saying, can be tough, is like, getting into the stuff like burn rate, getting into the stuff like run, like your runway, getting into stuff like, I always tell people, like, is this a new territory? Is this a new set of accounts? Who had this set of accounts last? What happened to them? Where are they? Can I talk to them? Is this a new territory? Is it a territory that's getting split and this is new? Well, who's the person that owns this? Who had this last? What was their performance? And then ask for the comp plan. Ask for the comp plan from last year. Why did it change? Why is this different? I mean, I could go on and on. There's so much important and valuable stuff. But I think first is understand what's important to you. Line that up with the data you can access about it. And then if you can't get something through RepVue, which is, like, connect through another user that has worked there, just, back channel LinkedIn, ping somebody. Hey, you worked there until 6 months ago. Would you be open to 20-minute conversation, have some questions, appreciate, whatever. People are more altruistic than you think when it comes to this specific topic. That's why we built so many ratings, because they're willing to do it and share.
Which makes sense. And do enough reps do that? Like basic groundwork, kind of just from what you can observe?
Probably not. I think I put a disclaimer on it, right? Whenever people ask me this all the time, I try to respond when I can with LinkedIn DMs. There's quite a few. I'm sensitive to the fact that people might not have health insurance, right? They might have a family to support, right? And this org looks crap, but you know what? It's an $85,000 base. I got 2 kids and they need health insurance. And when the economy turns around, maybe this will just tide me over, right? Totally get that, right? So you got to do what you got to do. And so I think so set that aside. And once you do that, I think making a little bit of a difference, more people are doing it, right? You're not sold. You made a good point earlier when it was just like all these pitches when times were great sounded exactly the same. Equity, rocket ship, growing super fast, et cetera, join the rocket ship, are found, and it's like pitching the funding, right? Well, what is the fund? Like, pitching the funding, everybody can get funding right now. Pitching the, having a party when you become a unicorn, right? Well, how much money do I get when we become a unicorn? Well, none, right? Like, right. It's just, so I think that in those times, nobody was really doing a lot of diligence, but it's changing for sure. It's changing.
Interesting. And then should reps do like real product due diligence, like go try and see a demo online, go look at reviews, like, because that has to be one of the biggest drivers as to like both the role you're getting into and then really understanding like what you're going to be selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I've interviewed thousands of salespeople over the years and hired, probably close to that, hundreds. And I think it's a lot of salespeople don't go deep enough. Yes, go to G2, read the reviews, right? Learn about it, understand, read the entire website. And you still probably, a lot of the marketing sites, you still don't really know what they're selling or what it is, right? So just ask questions.
Yeah.
I think I, as a former head of sales, used to appreciate when somebody started their line of questionings at the very basic. So the product, help me understand, my take is that it does this and this. Am I on base there? And then dig in with questions. Like, if you just even have a very cursory understanding of the product, all it does is then gives you a platform to ask more questions about it, because I think, it's another part of the interview process where like many salespeople are not technical. right? Some of them are like not at all, right? Like Excel is a problem, right? Like,
Yep.
and so, but then there's a spectrum where others are reasonably technical and they're not going to be writing code, but they kind of can get in there. And so that's a big thing. Like, can you grasp that understanding? And there's plenty of products, even SaaS, that are not that complicated from a technical standpoint that you could sell. And so I think that's got to be vetted out there as well. Who are you selling? Are you selling to the CISO, right? But you have zero capability to understand anything that what their language is. Like, that's a problem. So, and we actually track that within RepVue, which is we know the buyer persona that the company sells to, and we know the experience that the user has. So we can kind of match up, like, hey, some of our employer corporate customers we're trying to hire, like, HubSpot's an example, right? Like, all right, you guys sell to, you all sell to head of marketing, head of revenue. Well, here's thousands and thousands of sales reps with a similar profile of your top performers who have sold to the head of revenue, head of marketing. Like, that's a good fit versus the head of, IT or security or legal or other personas.
Interesting. And kind of transitioning from a rep doing due diligence on a company, let's imagine you're an investor, a growth equity firm, a private equity firm.
Yeah.
And, beyond the obvious metrics of growth and new logos and customer acquisition costs, how would you assess like the strength of a sales org? Like, let's just say you had 15 minutes with the chief revenue officer and really couldn't ask quantitative. Like, how would you attack it?
Yeah, 15 minutes is certainly not a lot of time, right? So first of all, if I'm an investor, I would have tried to get any information I could have from RepVue to give me a little bit of a head start.
Yep.
But, I think, like I said, 15 minutes isn't a lot of time. Where I typically start is I would just have them walk me through the machine, right? I posted something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. It was basically, if you want to be a head of sales, you're getting out of sales. You're getting into analytics, operations, HR, right? Those three things, right? So what I'm looking for is walk me through the machine, right? Like, take me through like how stuff moves all the way through, right? Where do the leads come from? When they come in, where do they go? Why do they go there? Like, literally, like who gets them and why? Like, what's the routing process? Oh, it goes there and there and there. Okay, so then how does it get qualified? Who does it? Why does it get triggered as qualified? And then once it's qualified, where does it go? Was it account executive? How is it routed? Why is it routed that way? And then the account executives walk me through the stages. Stage XYZ. What does a stage mean? And why does it mean that? And then what happens when it gets to this stage? Why would you close loss? What are the risk factors? Right. And then what percentage of your deal? Like, walk me through some of the metrics in there that go from stage to stage. What's your close rate? And so you're kind of getting a feel for like, what are the typical objections? What are your close loss reasons? So can the head of sales, do they know this? And for me, like, if they don't, like, they should, right? Like, they're the architect of the machine. And when I think about it, my experiences in companies, the sales team of maybe hundreds, not thousands, right? So somebody might argue, well, the CRO of a company with a 5,000 person sales team, their lieutenants do all that. And maybe, but I'd still want to know. And so my take is like, okay, well, and then you can start to dig into examples of like, all right, so your close rate is, 18%. Is that good? Do you think that's good? Like, and I don't know, like, and the person might say, yes. All right, well, okay, cool. Do you have a goal to get it any higher? Maybe it's not good. But what are the three things that you can do to move that needle? What about the lead qualification rate? That's 14%. Well, should it be 18%? Well, how would you get it there? Well, the lead quality. So we're tweaking this with working with marketing, the conversations that we're having with our SDRs, we're listening to the calls, we're coaching them there. So what I'm looking for diligence wise, if it's like growth equity, private equity, is walk me through the entire, and particularly these private equity folks, like, they're really good at this, right? They have their playbook. It's on lockdown. It's like a former CRO, and I did it for a few years. They have 6, 8, 10 people that have done that, and they all, have their thing, right? So, but that's what I'm looking for, is like, what is this playbook? How strong is it? I don't know everything, but like, can I get a sense that most of it and what you need to know, and you're pulling the levers and turning the dials to improve the sales org, right? And then like, what's your sales attrition? What's your quote? And I would ask the question from the candidate side or the investor side. Well, if your sales percent of team hitting quotas at 40, what do you want it to be? And then if you want it to be 50, like, what are the three things you're going to do to get it there? What are those initiatives? So that's kind of the approach I take, is like, let's talk through the machine, right? And then let's talk through what are the friction points or the leverage points that you have. And then, I don't know, can we do that in 15 minutes? We do some of it, not much.
That's a great answer. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You need a well-oiled machine and you need people who have like a granular understanding. Like when you really get into all of this, it's how your tech stack is configured, how your processes flow, right? Like this stuff doesn't happen by accident, for sure. And then we'll transition to something actionable and tactical. Like you've obviously hired a lot of people in your career. You're growing RepVue. Like what are some signs you look for in, let's say, an SDR? That they're going to turn into a good account executive? Like, what are some patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I think SDR is an interesting one, right? Because you're not looking for, so there's certain things like if it's an SDR and it's fairly entry, like did they show up at the interview on time? Were they professional? Did they ask some questions? Did they send a follow-up email? Right? Like, because it just tells me like, I don't care. Like, I don't need to know like, oh, I hit quota for 3 years as a junior SDR somewhere. Like, I'm just like, are you professional? Did you show up on time? Did you send a follow-up email? Did you do this? And then you might dig into some certain areas. Like sales is tough, right? You're going to get punched in the gut a bunch of times and then you get pat on the back every once in a while. So like, what is something you've overcome? Like we always look like the concept of, so two things that are big for me. Number one is intellectual curiosity. Okay. And that just comes down to like the questions that you're going to ask in the interview process. And it doesn't even have to be like, as long as I look at it like, are you building on questions? Right? Like to learn and dig deeper. Are you intellectually curious? Like, what are some things you do outside of work that tells me kind of what you're into? And like, are you learning about things? It just, because if you're curious, you're going to ask questions about from your buyer, right? You're going to learn about their business. As an early career seller, I thought I was like, interested in learning about people that I was selling to. Oh, I get to go sell to Toshiba and I meet with people from there. Or I get to go sell to people from, Ritz Camera. And like, okay, because I was, it's like, okay, well, learn about those businesses. So intellectual curiosity is one. And again, don't need experience for that. Grit is number two. So it's like, all right, well, did you wait tables to put yourself through college? People are like, oh, you play a sport because athletes are good at sales. No. You play a sport because you manage a bunch of shit that you had to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like you had a tough schedule. And I don't care if it's a sport or a band or a this, or it's like you had to do a lot and you successfully did that. Grit to overcome it. So those are like two things that I would look for in an SDR, more so than like, some sort of performance or like skills from your last job. Like you want to coach your SDR. So that's bringing them in. And then the proof's in the pudding. Like, the SDRs moving to AEs is going to be hitting numbers, right? Like it's the quadrant, like following the process and hitting numbers, right? You've seen that probably. It's like, you're following the process? Yes. You're hitting numbers? Yes. That's like the good quadrant. Following the process? No. Hitting numbers? Yes. That's kind of like the question mark. Like, all right, well, imagine what you could be doing. And then not following the process, not hitting your number is kind of like the no-go zone. Like, keep the resume, handy. And then following the process, not hitting numbers, that's the coaching zone, right? Let's see where we can help you. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So many people who listen to a podcast, right, are looking for that type of guidance. So that's great. Yeah. And then, where can people find you and how can they work with RepVue? I know you guys have kind of multiple constituencies given the nature of your platform.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're easy to find. I'm easy to find. Ryan at RepVue.com. Anybody can email me anytime they want. I'm on Twitter. DM me there if you want. Probably open. I'm on LinkedIn, although be careful DMing me there because it's pretty busy and I don't get a chance to look at all of them every day or week. Unfortunately, I wish I could. Just send me an email. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, if RepVue is interesting to people, if the potential data related to the organization, the sales organization's performance or health, is interesting, not just trend data, but performance of individual company data is interesting. If you're, reach out to us. If you're looking to hire salespeople too, there may be a fit as well. Reach out to us. We help companies hire salespeople too.
And just like in terms of job posts and the like on your site. Yep. So when sales reps are there, they can see so-and-so HubSpot is hiring, for example, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Our offerings are there's really three core offerings. Offering number one is B2B salespeople. This is the free offering. You're a salesperson. You go to the website, you submit a rating, and then you can access information about companies. Offering number two is corporates or employers who are looking to hire and looking to learn about their own sales org health. And then offering number three is those who are interested in researching and getting information around performance of companies through data, crowdsourced data that we capture. So yeah, and if any of those are interesting to anybody, just shoot me an email and we'll have a chat.
Perfect. Well, look, this has been great. I think we covered a lot of good ground. I really appreciate you being on and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, Matt.